Good morning, I'm Dilip, editor of Education World.
Good morning, I'm Summiya Yasmeen, managing editor.
In the July issue of Education World, we have some very interesting stories coming up. This is the first issue that after the new government, the new NDA government 3.0, led by the BJP, has been sworn in, which happened on June 4. So this is the first issue after that, and Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan has been reappointed Union Education Minister, and we've written about what should be his priorities in his second innings.
Yes. But before we go on to tell you about our cover story, as usual, we're going to take you through what's in store in our other sections.
Yes.
So again, information and packed issue we bring to you. And the first edit is, I think, perhaps the most cogent analysis of why the BJP lost ground in general election 2024. Yes, we have a BJP-led NDA government, but BJP doesn't have a majority on its own. It has to rely for the first time on coalition partners, the JDU and the TDP. So we've written an analysis of saying why BJP lost ground. It's, like I said, the most cogent analysis.
Yes, it's all about S1 and S2 decision making.
Yes.
And the second editorial is about the inequalities in income and wealth inequalities in India, which have been getting a lot of coverage in the press recently.
Yeah.
So we discuss, and this is all out of the French economist Thomas Piketty's work on global inequalities. So we have given our own take that perhaps inequalities are inevitable in the growth stage of our economy, and it might be a better idea not for high income people to be asked to contribute to government coffers. Might be they should be encouraged instead to invest their wealth in the public interest in businesses and enterprises, because we argue that governments waste a lot of money.
In our education news section, again, a very topical and timely news stories from around the country. From Delhi, we've got a story on the NCERT history textbooks, social sciences textbook, how this, gone into the third revision exercise by NCERT, and this time round, they've cut out chapters on the Gujarat riots. Babri Masjid now is being referred to as a three-domed structure and not as the Babri Masjid. So we write about the politics of education and rewriting textbooks.
Yes.
And in Karnataka, we have a controversy brewing between the Women and Child and Welfare Department and
ministries
and the Education Ministry over starting of Anganwadis, preschool, early childhood education centers in government primary secondary schools.
Yeah, well, the main question is who should have jurisdiction over Anganwadis? Should it be the Women and Child Development Ministry or the Education Ministry?
Yes. And from West Bengal, of course, a newly resurgent TMC led by Mamata Banerjee, they won more seats in the Lok Sabha.
Congress Party.
Trinamool Congress Party won more seats than the BJP, and she's hitting back. She wants, because of the NET row, she wants, states to get control over medical colleges admissions. So we've got a story from West Bengal on that.
In fact, in short, she's asking for abolition of NEET.
Yes.
That's the National Eligibility and Entrance Test for Medical Education, replaced by a state examination.
Yes, as it was before. Basically, they want to go back to the status quo pre-2016. And in Tamil Nadu, we have done a story on, how there is still a caste discrimination and casteism in schools, especially in the rural areas. And, the government and the Madras High Court have given some directions on how schools and education institutions should address casteism.
No. The main point is that the lower castes have been ruling in Tamil Nadu since 1967. And in spite of that, they have not been able to eradicate the worst vestiges of casteism, which is, and we wonder why this is not happening starting from school education.
Absolutely. So we have interesting education notes and briefs also from a lot of other states such as Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh in our education notes section. And now we come to expert columns, expert comment.
Yes.
So we have well-known columnist, political commentator Rashid Kidwai, who's written on general election 2024, interpreting the verdict.
We have given our interpretation of the verdict in the editorial, and he's given his interpretation in this special page.
Yes, where he says that, one of the highlights of the general election 2024 is the resurgence of the Congress party and of Rahul Gandhi.
Yes, indeed. Then some quite interesting young achievers, though we lament quite often that there are no inventions ever coming out of India, but on our young achievers page we always highlight quite a lot of inventors. But unfortunately, nothing is heard of them after that. But that's another.
And institution profile, again, two very interesting institution profiles, one on the Hiranandani Upscale School in Chennai, and in our foreign university, we've profiled the University of Adelaide from Australia.
Yeah.
And now to our cover story, Dilip.
Yes, indeed.
Titled Dharmendra Pradhan's Second Innings Priorities. I think in this very, very important story, we outline what the minister's priorities in his second term should be, from early childhood right up to higher education and skills education.
Yes. And we've talked to a lot of experts who either support or oppose our opinions.
Yes.
But it's a balanced story.
Yeah.
And then we have a report card of the BJP NDA government from 1914 to 2024, over a decade. Yes. Where we say which are the
2014.
areas. 2014. Yeah. So where we say that they've where they've made some achievements and where they've made some omissions also.
Yeah. So the main challenge of the minister, Dilip, as you correctly write, is how to implement NEP 2020. We have this great document, but how are you going to take it to the classrooms from early childhood to higher education?
Yes. And the way we say this is the minister is taking over at an inflection point in the history of Indian education, because now there's a virtual consensus amongst all the television talking heads who earlier never used to talk about education. Now every one of them actually says we have to educate and skill our population, otherwise sine qua non. And this is what we've been saying for the last 25 years. And I'm glad that our message is now getting through to all the eggheads and the punditry and the commentariat, that if you don't educate our children and skill them well, they're not going to be able to implement any of the fine economic policies that are being drafted and produced by government.
Yes.
And the tragedy, again, of course, which we also talk about, is that once again the minister has refused to grant us an interview or even answer some written questions that we sent to him. And one is, like we say, is ducked, a non-bouncer. We lament the refusal of the minister to talk to us, though we are India's #1 education magazine for the last 20 years. I mean, right from the start. And we are the category founders, and we are the people who put education into national limelight and the focus. And we don't intend, as we say in my letter from the editor, we don't want to do it in a confrontationalist way. We want to deliberate, and I think the minister owes an explanation to the public through our forums and not through some anodyne mainstream media interviews, to give a proper explanation, explaining the rationale of the policies of the government and why they're doing what they're doing in education, which is of a very, very serious consequence for generations to come. Absolutely. And the reluctance of the minister to consistently refuse to talk to us is inexplicable and certainly not in the national interest.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, be that as it may, in our people section, we've profiled very accomplished and high achievers.
Educators.
Yes, educators. So an interesting people is this new promoter of a school, Dr. Sunil Tumala, who's promoted a new age school in Bangalore called the School of Raya, with a very interesting circular architecture and design.
Yes,
and
amazing architecture.
Yeah, and the only school in India to have a skate park,
a climbing wall.
Yes,
also, yes.
Yes. So a very interesting story there.
Interesting new initiative, and high potential.
Yeah, and of course, our international news section brings with you. We're the only education-focused publication, like Dilip said, in India, and the only perhaps publication which writes about what's happening in education in other countries.
No, forget about it. Yes, indeed, in education. Because unfortunately, we found that there's very little coverage in what's happening in neighboring countries, and certainly true of education.
Yes.
So this is a very interesting section. In fact, I think it's one of our most interesting sections.
Indeed. And our special report this time is very important. It talks about, it gives you really the real story behind the NEET mess. Those who've been following the newspapers, television, I mean, it's all everywhere, that how there's been accusations of huge swindles, malpractice in the NEET exam.
NEET being, I think you should spell it out.
National Eligibility Cum Entrance Exam, which is the only national entrance test for admission into all undergrad medical colleges across India.
Yes, and they're not a very large number.
Yes,
of them.
So as soon as the results were out on June 4th, which incidentally coincided with the release of the general election 2024 results. Since then, there's been controversy-ridden chaos. I mean, allegations of award of grace marks, paper leaks, plus other swindles, corruption, cheating, etc. The matter is now in the Supreme Court, and here we really talk about, the solution. What is the solution to this mess?
And what is the role and what is the future of the NTA, which is the National Testing Agency established by this
NDA government,
BJP NDA government in 2016 to conduct all national entrance examinations, all important national entrance examinations.
So it's a very interesting story. Like I said, it gives the real story behind the NEET mess. Talks about lack of capacity in medical education. It addresses larger issues. It doesn't only look at the surface and talk about only about the scams and all that. It also talks about capacity creation, the fundamental problem, capacity creation in higher education, especially in medical education.
And
which has been stifled.
Important to point out that 2.3 million students school leavers wrote the NEET exam
for competing for just about 100,000 medical seats.
Yes.
And within that also really the government seats, which are about 55,000, which offers education at highly subsidized rates.
There's a very complex structure of subsidies. Government medical education is very highly subsidized. Then comes private education, which is not so highly subsidized. I mean, which is near market rates.
Yes,
near market
very
rates.
expensive, where fees can range for a 5-year program from 60 lakhs to 1 crore.
Yeah, and of course, then there's the other option is foreign education.
Yeah.
Which was very expensive, but is now getting cheaper because a lot of medical students are going to countries like Kazakhstan and
Ukraine, China, Nepal, Bangladesh.
Yes, for medical education. Yeah. I think the bottom problem is that we have to increase the capacity in education. There are only some 700 medical colleges in India, right? And for a nation of 1 billion, that's completely inadequate.
Anyway, it's a very interesting story. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the solutions. Read it. We give some very innovative solutions on how to resolve this big NTA exams disaster.
Yes. And medical education in general.
Yes, indeed.
Not only the exams disaster.
Yeah. And we have a team, quite an interesting teacher to teacher on successful management of lifelong learning. And also our EducationWorld Higher Education Grand Jury rankings, Dilip, have been printed in this issue.
Yes.
Where we have set up a jury to rank and rate nominated higher education institutions in various categories, which include international outreach partner, enabling startup culture, emerging study programs pioneer, exemplary researcher of the year, top performing university of the year, best academia industry alliance.
I think you need to point out that this is different from our Education World India higher education rankings, which are based on field-based surveys. This is done by these rankings are by an expert jury and based on nominations received by us and including self-nomination.
Absolutely right. Our book review section, again, very interesting, Dilip. We've got 2 book reviews. One, the latest book by Neerja Chowdhury on prime ministerial decision making in India, where she looks at 6 PMs, including Manmohan Singh
and Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Yeah.
And the second book review is Being Muslim in Hindu India, Critical View. It's a very thought-provoking book review. And certainly I'm sure the book is also very...
Postscript.
And of course, our most popular and highly read page called Postscript, where the first one asks, how come all the tele channels with their cephalogists and wonderful studios completely
got the 2024 general election verdict so wrong?
Forecast. The forecast was completely wrong.
Yeah, especially the exit polls.
And what is the reason for that?
Yeah.
We give you our viewpoint. And then, of course, what are some of the extraordinary ups and downs of the general election, like Smriti Irani losing, Prime Minister Modi.
Yes, and BJP losing in Ayodhya, the BJP candidate losing in Ayodhya.
Yeah, and Prime Minister Modi's majority cut down drastically from 300 to 240. And then the third postscript, we talk about how come our political leaders are able to build big palaces and ornate mansions and luxury resorts for themselves, but they have no money at all for schools and laboratories and libraries in schools. According to us, for the clue to that is you have to look under the provision made for item known as establishment expenses in all the budgets. We think that they are much too high, and they hide all these kind of expenditures. And curiously, nobody is ready to talk about it. We are the only people who are always questioning establishment expenditure in not only in our budget issue, but continuously through the year.
Yes. So that's our July 2024 issue
of
Education World. Now moving to Parents World. Here again, I think a very important story and issue we've highlighted, Dilip, on how we advise parents on how to avoid the pitfalls of affluenza parenting.
Affluenza, as opposed to being from the word affluent.
Yes. And we've taken the case of the Pune teen who, ran over and killed 2, young techies in Pune, 17-year-old teen, and how a lot of people attributed that to affluenza parenting. An underage child was driving, consumed all alcohol, etc. We've taken that story as a news peg, and we, advise parents on how affluent parents can, raise responsible, well-grounded children
and control their children, basically, and make sure that they don't run afoul of the law and commit such atrocities on the public. Well, that's all.
Well, that's all. Education World and Parents World July 2024. Read, absorb, and engage with us.
Thank you.